All right, this is it, folks. We got one more story to get into, which, of course, you know what that means, everybody. It's about time we're getting into the grand finale. And with this grand finale, we're going to go and discover some lost media. Or it's already been discovered and many people have talked about it, but it's going to be our turn to have our discussions. Now, Nick, just out of curiosity, did you watch some Family Guy, or do you still watch Family Guy?
I watched it regularly, and I even had, the original, DVDs that came out. And at the time, I thought that would be, all of Family Guy that we had ever got. So when it came back, I was ecstatic. And for the first several years it came back, yes, I did watch it religiously. And even as it kind of became more inconsistent, I still, watched it. I haven't kept up with some of the latter seasons, but, I do still have a lot of affection for the show, as, a lot of people do.
Yeah, I would say that I'm on the same boat as you. Like when I was a young teen, I used to watch a lot of Family Guy. And for a few years, like I used to watch it like almost regularly, like every Sunday whenever there's like a new episode coming out. So yeah, there's been a good amount of years that I used to watch a lot of Family Guy alongside The Simpsons. Admittedly, it's been a while since I've seen any of the new episodes of Family Guy, but I mean, from time to time, I do see like some clips that are on YouTube, like with some of the, with some of the cutaway gags. With, I kind of got a little bit of like a bit of an idea of how things are nowadays. But we're not going to talk about Family Guy now. I'm talking about Family Guy then, or specifically what Family Guy used to be with the Lost Pilot. Yes, one of the biggest animation news that happened last week was the fact that the lost pilot of Family Guy has been discovered. Now, when it comes to this version of Family Guy here, technically some people have already seen it, but they've only seen about half of it, considering that it had already been circulating around. In fact, it was already released on the Volume 2 DVD of Family Guy. But in this case here, this is a little bit different because this is actually the full pilot. Because beforehand, they only showed around 7 to 8 minutes. But this time, this is the full 16-minute episode. And to go and give you the story of how they actually found this out, let me go and actually read you here from my source on AV Club, in which it states, as it is often the case with the kind of rediscovered finds, the full version of the demo was discovered in a fairly random and innocuous place, i.e. the website of animator Robert Paulson. Not, we feel like it's important to clarify, the well-known voice actor Rob Paulson of Pinky and the Brain fame. Paulson, who is credited for digital inks and paints and compositing on the episode, apparently uploaded the video of his work portfolio back in 2022, or he uploaded the video to his work portfolio back in 2022, but it went undiscovered for several years, until it was recently found by user Ghost the Dead Girl of the Lost Media Wiki Discord. And from there, everybody has been talking about what they have witnessed in the Family Guy Lost Pilot, now fully talking about what they have seen here. So, just out of curiosity, Nick, what did you think of the Lost Pilot?
Well, like you've mentioned, my first exposure to the original Family Guy pilot was when it was on the Volume 3 DVD. And in that version, it cuts off right around the same time that Peter goes on welfare. And I assumed at the time, I guess that's all they filmed. That's all they bothered to animate, seeing how this was just the pilot. So when I heard that, that the entire thing had been found, I'm like, what? There's an entire thing? And looking back, I actually, got major deja vu just going back, remembering what was different, what was the same. And, it's definitely just the blueprints of what Family Guy would be. But it's still kind of a proper representation of what it became, where, it's basically gag after gag, and it's more joke-based than character-based sometimes, especially in this Lost Pilot, because, Peter and Stewie, they have a decent idea about who they are, but everyone else, hasn't been fully formed yet, and that would definitely change between the original pilot and the later pilot. So, it is an interesting artifact, even though, it kind of reminds me of that episode of Family Guy where Stewie and Brian go back to the pilot episode and they kind of comment on how the animation, isn't as polished. And I can only imagine how they would respond if they went back to this pilot just to see, how everyone almost sounds the same and how the animation is really rough, but there is an undeniable charm to that.
Yeah, I will admit that, watching this, it is definitely a fascinating piece of animation history, considering how Family Guy is now one of the biggest adult animated series of all time. It is interesting to see like how some of the things have originated, like the format of like the cutaway gags, seeing like the original idea of what they want to do with the family and stuff like that. And even like the signature style of the visuals of Family Guy, how like they try to develop, they start trying to develop that, and how, yes, it is true that for the most part with this, it's kind of like basically what we've seen with the pilot. It's kind of like basically a prototype of what we have ultimately gotten with the first real episode, which I do believe it is called Death of a Shadow or something. Yeah, Death Has a Shadow. So it is pretty much like a prototype to that. But I gotta say, like, as someone who has seen Family Guy for years, and even though it's been a while since I've seen any of the new episodes, it was a weird experience. It was a weird trip revisiting this Family Guy. And like, one of the reasons is how there are so many things that really do differentiate, not just from like how Family Guy is now, but even from back then. And like, one of the most prominent differences is actually Chris, because this pilot was even before they brought in Seth Green to be the voice of Chris. And they only had, it was Seth Green again doing the voice. So just to give you a little bit of an example, just to make you listen to it. And okay, there was a fart that actually got away there, oddly enough. Where is it? Yeah, like right here. Let's just take a quick little listen to Chris's voice from back then.
Let me see, $150. Wait, that's not a decimal, that's a comma. Hey, move your thumb, Dad.
Like that, it's funny how it's obviously still Seth MacFarlane, but from there, like, it's kind of wild to hear, like, oh, that's what they want to do with Chris's voice. Ugh. Like, what did you think? Like, should Seth MacFarlane have stayed as Chris's voice there?
Yeah, I think they definitely made the right move, and getting in Seth Green, and they probably didn't expect someone to do, Buffalo Bill impression, but that clearly clicked for the character. And the voice that MacFarlane does as Chris there, it's kind of leaked into other, parts of, Family Guy. You can still hear that voice here and there in other characters, but yeah, the great thing about, Seth MacFarlane, the characters that he would ultimately end up voicing, is that they never sound like the same person. Like, I was amazed when I first learned that Peter Griffin, Glenn Quagmire, Stewie Griffin, and Brian Griffin were all from the same guy. But if you told me that if he did the original voice of Chris too, I'd definitely be like, yeah, that's definitely just the same guy, just slightly changing the voice. So it's definitely a good call that they brought someone else in there, and they also brought in several others.
Yeah, I will say Seth MacFarlane is an extremely talented voice actor. Like, there's no denying there. And especially the versatility that he presented in Family Guy is a great example of that. But his role as Chris, like, nah, like, it would fit another character. But this one is like, nah, we could tell it's you again, dude. But speaking of voices, also, another thing that was very fascinating to see is also with Lois. And especially, like, yeah, it's always been Alex Borstein. But at the same time, though, it's kind of, like, interesting to see how Lois was very subdued back then. Like, she's very, like, compared to how Lois is nowadays, like, she's very much down to earth. And that, like, and this still continued on, like, in the first season, like, where Lois is, like, a lot more calm, and her voice, it wasn't as nasally as it was here.
Yeah, it used to be a lot slower like this, and then as it went on, it went more and more like this, more energized. And that's also kind of when the character started to come more into her own, because ever she is kind of just a very subdued wife, and in the original pilot, they even cut out an entire subplot that she would have, in, the ultimate pilot, with her learning that Peter's been lying to her. So they would give her more agency as the series went on, and at this point, I don't think they've really quite figured out who Lois is, and I think the same could be said about Meg and also Chris and even Brian, who doesn't get as many lines here because a
Yeah.
lot of them, went to Chris in this version.
Yeah, like it is true. Like back then, Lois was kind of like a Marge Simpson clone, but then over time, like they did give her her own personality. And I guess that is true. Like, I mean, I get it. Like, not all the characters have like their prominent time to shine. Like, with like, yeah, Meg and Brian, they have mostly been sidelined. And like, even Chris is like, maybe they developed Chris like to be a bit more like a rebel per se, but not much. But then, oh, speaking of personalities, though, like one of the weirdest things is actually seeing Stewie as the evil genius. Because, like, okay, like I know it's kind of crazy to say because, like, yeah, like one of the popular traits of Stewie is how like he is that evil genius, but nowadays like he's more of this flamboyant personality. But I think it's like it's only what it only was like a few years that they focus on Stewie being purely this evil genius who wants to exterminate Lois. Like that was like the only thing that he was, that was the only thing that was about him. That was like his one legit trait. And seeing this here, like revisiting like the old Family Guy, like it kind of like sprung this weird memory. I was like, oh yeah, Stewie was like that. Like even during the time when I was watching it, like they kind of gave up halfway through. And some people have even mentioned that apparently like Stewie stopped being evil after the 2007 writer's strike. What did you think about like seeing Stewie being that evil again?
You know what? Yeah, because for the first season, that was pretty much the only note he had, and I will say that of all the characters in the pilot, Dewey is probably the closest to anyone else to representing who he would become in the pilot, because they do seem to have some idea about what to do with him. The thing is that even though, it might be controversial to say, I don't know how much you can really do with Stewie if he had just remained, a diabolical genius, because, it's kind of like Pinky and the Brain, where sure, they try to take over the world in every episode, but if you really watch every episode, you find that that leads to a lot of different things, to the point where, like, are you still trying to take over the world? Because, they keep trying different things with those characters. So I do think that it was probably wise for them to move Stewie in a more direction. But yeah, going back, just seeing the old school Stewie, it is, kind of surreal just seeing how far the character has come and where he started from.
Yeah, I think it's honestly the right move where they kind of gave that closure to that side of him, because I remember like back when I was watching, they did this whole like a big deal where they did like a special where Stewie actually did kill Lois, or there was this alternate timeline where Stewie successfully killed Lois and like victory was legitimately his. But then like, they had that going on, and then suddenly it was official, and suddenly it turns out to be this weird simulation. And then they officially retired the evil Stewie, and now we got the flamboyant Stewie. So yeah, like it was interesting to see. Also, it is also worth mentioning, by the way, about the whole pilot itself, is the fact that it was made on a micro budget. The factor that Seth MacFarlane, like when Seth MacFarlane pitched this, or hold on a sec, there is a little bit of a story. I believe the AV Club actually said, let's see here. Yeah, the full version of the 5,000. I don't know if they actually said the whole story, but the thing is that Seth MacFarlane was only given $50,000 in order to go and create this pilot. And I gotta say that, yeah, the budget did show, because in terms of the animation, yeah, it's one thing for the designs to be different, but I can't help but think that they really gave this movie, or not a movie, but they gave this pilot this very Hanna-Barbera like look. Like, what do you think about the animation?
Yeah, it's not surprising seeing how McFarlane was technically starting at Hanna-Barbera when he was working on shows like Dexter's Lab and Johnny Bravo. And it definitely shows that it was only about 50,000 point proof of concept. And it's ironic that Peter actually gets more in his welfare check than Seth MacFarlane got as an entire thing. It actually might have been a better in-joke if Peter just got $50,000 a week. But, maybe they just weren't considering that. But, it shows that they were working with what they had.
Yeah, it's true. And there are some times I gotta say with the animation, like it is noticeable how the budget is like so low. Like one scene that really stood out is when all the guys were watching like they were trying to watch a porno, but it turns out to be like something that got taped over, and that suddenly like they want to try to make a plan in order to work with it, and that's when you see the animation getting at its cheapest. Like here's an example.
We're gonna drink till she's hot.
Hey, that's just crazy enough to work.
I just love how like quickly they just went from like just standing there and then suddenly like just suddenly taking their drink immediately. And that's another thing, by the way, that it shows the budget, like considering that it is Seth MacFarlane doing like a lot of the voices, like a lot of the side characters, along with Peter, Stewie, Brian, Chris, and a prototype of Quagmire. And I think he also did the old boss as well. Like he did the great majority of the voices. But and maybe this is just the voice actor side of me, so I definitely have grown an ear for this. But Seth was not in a professional recording studio when doing those voices. Like you could hear the echo prominently displayed throughout the entire episode.
Yeah, it sounds a lot like, the early like South Park when they did, Santa versus Jesus, where the voices don't sound quite right either. Not just, the sound of the voices, but just the way they're recorded. You can tell it's not really in a professional, setting that they're doing it. They're just, working with whatever little resources they have at their disposal for what limited funds they have. It definitely has that feel to it.
Yeah, it does. I mean, and I'm not necessarily saying that as a bad thing. Again, I am very aware that it only has a $50,000 budget. But still, it just adds to the weird trippy experience of seeing Family Guy like this. So overall, I gotta say that this is definitely quite a find, and a great find, by the way, of getting the full original pilot. But I will say it was such a strange experience just revisiting not just Family Guy, but the old Family Guy, and especially seeing it in a way that what it used to be, with alternate colors for their costumes, with the different voices that they would go and use. It was strange to see what Family Guy used to be, as well as Family Guy on a massive budget. It almost felt like someone was asked to go and recreate the first episode of Family Guy from memory. That's the feeling that I got from all this. So it was, definitely a great find, but it was a strange experience seeing what they've done, seeing what they've done here.
Especially without the Kool-Aid guy. How could they not have him in the original?
Yeah, that is true. That's the one thing. Yeah, that's often the biggest criticism I've seen people actually say. Where is it? Just want to go and just try to let's see where.
Right there in the trial scene.
Yeah, on the trial.
Yeah.
Where is it? Yeah, I think right here.
More than me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're saying, oh no,
Oh, no.
Oh, there it is.
Oh no.
Oh, no.
Oh no.
Oh no.
I love how, okay, I remember now. The old boss is Mr. Weed. I love how there's a delay. It's just, oh no, and then immediately cut him out. But yeah, it is very strange they did that without the Kool-Aid Man.
Maybe they didn't have the budget. Or
Oh yeah,
maybe they weren't sure if they could get the rights. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's more of a rights issue because, like, yeah, they did do a reference of stuff like the Brady Bunch and Tom Hanks's stuff, but like they could get away with that. But it's like specifically the imagery of the Kool-Aid Man. Yeah, that I think they got to go and like have to pay up something. All right, so with that said, now I would like to go and pass this on to the chat wall, and I'd like to ask you all, what did you think of the discovery of the full lost pilot of Family Guy? Did you actually watch the pilot? Did you not? And if so, what did you think of it? I would love to know your thoughts on that. Let's see now. I'll admit, I'm not really a big Family Guy fan. This is still a major discovery, seeing how different the pilot is compared to the original series. It is fascinating, and it's definitely a big discovery. Also, speaking of lost media, I have to ask you, Nick, did you see the trailer of the canceled live-action Powerpuff Girls series that was found not too long ago?
Yes, I did, and pretty much everything that's been said about it is true. I guess I won't add more negativity to it, but I will just say two things. Number one, I'm glad that Tom Kenny got paid because I'm pretty sure that's his voice in the trailer.
Yeah,
and
it is.
two, I'm glad Dove Cameron is still working because she's really underappreciated in Schmigadoon.
Fair enough. They got something. Again, like as an actor, I do understand how it sucks when something, when a project that you've worked weeks on doesn't go through. But still, though, like considering the project it is, it's for the best.
Yeah, better to cut your losses at that point.
Yeah, exactly. Let's see. The pilot is wild yet fascinating. Okay. I never really had much of a relationship with Family Guy, adult shows. Not really a fan of. I have seen some episodes when I was younger without my parents' restraints, and I will admit that they're pretty funny. I think they were way too dependent on pop culture gags, not to mention the extremeness, not my cup of tea. I will give credit that it did give a starting point to other famous creators like Dan Povenmire and Butch Hartman. It's not for me, but still fascinating in itself. All right. My life is like multiple Family Guy cutaway gags. Say Peter, do you remember the time that Lois had blonde hair and Chris had a different voice? Also, this would have been Cleveland's first appearance as well, and his voice is white as ever in this. So yeah, it's an interesting find. As a Family Guy stan, it's absolutely fascinating. Oh, that's true. They did have Cleveland in this. It was just a short moment after like Meg touched the thermostat. I just want to go and like quickly double check. Was it like at the beginning? Oh, yeah. It's like right over here. Like right over. Yeah. Like.
And how does he always know?
Brain implant, Meg. Every father's got one. Tells you when the children are messing with the dial.
Hey, Peter, my thing went off. Your thermostat okay?
Yeah, it's all right.
Hey, is my kid over here?
Forget it. False alarm.
Yeah, there he is. There's Cleveland. Oh yeah, and they gave him a much whiter voice than the previous one. Oh boy. Yeah. It's also very interesting to see like who would be Peter's friends in the future, especially with that, like with what I mentioned before, the prototype Quagmire. That was also another weird, like that was another thing that was like additionally strange. Like, yeah, this guy right over here that, it's like a much more subdued design compared to what we have now. Oh boy. All right. I think we got one more comment that we could go and check out. Let's see. Chumbawamba Goobly Goo, we got some Lost Pilot only for you. I really enjoyed the pilot, especially the part where Stewie hypnotizing the judge before Peter went to jail for years. This is such a true sight to behold to see the original pilot being found. Though it was a shame that I didn't see the Kool-Aid Man appearing in the pilot, but I guess it is what it is. Also, fun little quiz. What is your favorite Family Guy character minus Stewie? That is a good question. Honestly, I haven't really thought about that. I mean, maybe Stewie after he moved on from the whole like evil genius thing, but yeah, either Peter or Stewie. What about you?
It would probably be Peter or Quagmire, or I'll show some love to Greased Up Deaf Guy.
Oh my god, the Greased Up Deaf Guy. I forgot about him. Yeah, I would honestly, it's been such a long time. Honestly, I haven't thought about it. I would just need a bit of a refresher of like all the people in Quahog to like make sure that if I could point out to one that I really do like. But yeah, again, it's been such a long time since I've thought about Family Guy that honestly, I kind of forgot about like many of the other characters. I'm sure that I do have more than just Peter and Stewie. All right. Oh, actually, there is one extra one I want to go, or maybe two. Actually, we do have time for two. Hold on. The fact that the lost pilot of Family Guy is in its full was discovered was an interesting case of lost media being found. It puts everything about the show in retrospect and shows how far the show has come to see what worked and what didn't work about the show at first. The pilot was way different than the Death Has a Shadow version. Thank you. Unrelated, but did you know that The Day the Earth Blew Up had 2 Disney animators credited, like John Pomeroy and Tony Bancroft? Oh, that's nice. All right, here's the last one. Okay. When I watched this for the first time, it was surreal. It's kind of passable. It is more of a proof of concept, but I'll give it this. It's a neat find. But even with a $50,000 budget, it looks really dirty, honestly. And not in that way. Get your mind out of the gutter.